The Science of Near-Death Experiences, Book Review, by Antti Savanainen. Dr. Bruce Grayson, After. A doctor explores what near-death experiences reveal about life and beyond. Bantam Press, Great Britain, 2021. Introduction. Scientific research on near-death experiences is very interesting from the point of view of theosophy or any other spiritual worldview. NDE research has revealed many phenomena that have been described in theosophical and anthroposophical literature for more than 100 years. These include out-of-body experiences, life reviews at the gates of death, and transitions to another realm of existence, which theosophy calls the astral plane. One might say that in this regard, modern science is our best ally. As Master K.H. wrote in one Mahatma letter. Here I will provide an overview of Dr. Bruce Grayson's book After, which discusses some research that challenges the materialistic notion that consciousness is produced by the brain. An intriguing incident. Bruce Grayson, born in 1946, a professor emeritus of psychiatry and neurobehavioral sciences at the University of Virginia, is one of today's leading NDE researchers. In addition to regular psychiatric work, he has worked in the university's Division of Perceptual Studies, which was founded by Professor Ian Stevenson, the pioneer of research on children's past life memories. Grayson's interest in NDEs began with an intriguing incident that took place about 50 years ago. When he was starting his career as a psychiatrist, Grayson was eating spaghetti when he was paged from the ward. Startled, he got some sauce on his tie. He placed a white lab coat on to cover the stain. He then hurried to help Holly, a young woman who had tried to take her own life. He found the sleeping Holly connected to a heart monitor, with a sitter watching her as the protocol required. Holly had been unconscious during her whole stay in the ER. After checking Holly's condition, Grayson walked to the family lounge at the far end of the hallway to meet Holly's roommate, Susan, who had found her and called an ambulance. Susan answered Grayson's questions about Holly's situation. Then he walked back to the exam room. Holly was still unconscious. The next day, after Holly woke up, Grayson met with her. She immediately said that she knew who Grayson was because she had seen and heard the conversation with Susan. She also demonstrated that she knew what they had talked in another room quite far away. Holly also said she knew that Grayson had been wearing a striped tie with a red stain on it. This event baffled Grayson, whose scientific worldview couldn't explain Holly's observations. He thought that it had to be a lucky guess or some kind of trick. However, he didn't mention the incident to his colleagues or even to his wife. He didn't consider NDEs as an explanation, because he knew nothing about them at the time. Becoming an NDE researcher. The first book on the NDE, Raymond Moody's Life After Life, was published in 1975. Moody already had a PhD in philosophy when he started as an intern in the Psychiatric Emergency Service at the University of Virginia, which was directed by Grayson at the time. Moody introduced Grayson to the NDE phenomenon. Grayson was stunned to find out that Holly's experience was not unique. This was a starting point of his career as an NDE researcher. Later, Grayson co-founded the International Association for Near-Death Studies and edited the Journal of Near-Death Studies, which for over a quarter century has been the only scholarly journal dedicated to research on this subject. Perhaps Grayson's most significant scientific contribution is the Grayson NDE scale. Although Grayson himself doesn't use this name for it, the scale was developed and later further validated statistically to measure the depth of a near-death experience. Grayson notes that the scores are appropriate for comparing different studies addressing NDEs. It isn't useful in dealing with individual experiences. A low score might still lead to life-changing spiritual transformations. What research has to say. Skeptics have suggested that the NDEs are just hallucinations, which arise as a reaction to the danger of dying. To address this possibility, Grayson discusses two studies interviewing cardiac arrest patients after their resuscitation. Those who had NDEs could accurately describe what happened to them during the resuscitation, whereas those with no NDEs couldn't. In addition, Grayson refers to a review article by Professor Jan Holden, which found 107 cases of apparently non-physical veridical perception. Only one detail not corresponding to consensus reality was enough to classify the perception as non-physical. Of these, only 8% involved any inaccuracy. One might expect some hits due to pure luck, but 92% is too high a success rate. Hence, the hallucination hypothesis is not supported by available empirical evidence. Could it be that the NDE can happen only to people with mental disorders? Many studies show that there is no difference between the NDE groups and the non-NDE groups in this regard. Interestingly, Grayson and other researchers have found out that NDEs can alleviate the anxiety produced by a life-threatening situation. Psychological research has shown that it's quite possible for memories to change over time. Does this happen to NDE memories in a way that enhances their positive features? Grayson used research to investigate this possibility. His longitudinal study spanning 4 decades showed that there was no change in NDE memories over that time. On the other hand, the stability of a memory does not necessarily mean that the event really took place. Could it be that NDE memories are imagined? Grayson was able to answer this question as well by using a memory characteristics questionnaire which was designed to differentiate memories of real events from memories of fantasies and dreams. He found that the memories of the experience by people who had NDEs were like those of real events. In fact, Grayson goes on to say that their memories on the NDE were in a sense more real than those of real events, having more details, clarity, context, and intense feelings. It is often stated that NDEs are caused by the lack of oxygen in the brain. This possibility has been empirically investigated in clinical conditions monitoring victims of cardiac arrest. People who had NDEs had at least as high a level of oxygen in the blood as people who had heart attacks without NDEs. Some hallucinogens, especially ketamine, can induce experiences resembling the NDE. But ketamine has other effects, which are not observed in the context of the NDE. Grayson concludes that there is no evidence that NDEs are caused by hallucinogens. Grayson highlights the life-changing after-effects of the NDE. Typically, it brings about positive changes in the subject's life. Love for people, animals, and nature becomes an important value, whereas the pursuit of wealth and social status seems less important. Although most NDE after-effects are good, some people can face difficulties with loved ones who do not accept the subject's change in belief or lifestyle. Some NDErs can also have difficulties in reconciling their experience with their religious beliefs. Even familiarity with NDE research can change one's views of life. Grayson points to studies showing that fear of death decreased and compassion toward other people increased when the participants read about NDEs. These changes were also observable in a follow-up study, suggesting that the positive effects could be long-lasting. Indeed, Grayson himself testifies that his NDE research moved his worldview in a more spiritual direction. Final thoughts. Modern neuroscience assumes that the brain produces consciousness, implying that there can be no survival of consciousness after brain death. Although this model certainly explains phenomena such as the effects of brain damage or alcohol, it seems to be inadequate for explaining the NDE. If the materialistic view is correct, NDE subjects should have no veridical experiences when the brain is not functioning. Yet many do. The origin of consciousness is still an unresolved scientific problem. Grayson proposes an alternative model. The brain is a receiver and filter, which enables the mind to operate in the physical world. If, for one reason or another, the brain doesn't function normally, the thoughts and emotions sent by the mind cannot pass through. NDE research strongly suggests that the mind can operate independently of the physical brain. Of course, this is not news to theosophists, anthroposophists, or other spiritually or religiously inclined people. It's important to note that scientific methods can be applied to any natural phenomenon. Science is not a collection of facts but a process. Nonetheless, it's remarkable that a non-materialistic model of consciousness can be proposed based on scientific research. This gives hope for a new emerging paradigm of science which would have room for spiritual realities. I heartily recommend Grayson's lucid book for anyone interested in what science has to say about the NDE.